Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Well, hey, Alex, thanks for asking me. As I've said before, I really enjoy talking with you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely. So, what would you describe as the beginning of your spiritual journey?
Oh boy. Well, consciously, um, an experience I had in December of 1979, which I call an awakening. I have come to think that it was the result of an action I took at a different point in my life, a point that would have been down the road, which that's a longer conversation, but it definitely was that morning I woke up. It was a Sunday morning, um, and I woke up and everything was different. I mean, I was different. The first thing I did was lift my hands up, and I was looking at my hands, and my thought was, "These are not my hands."
Damn.
and and then I looked at the wall and I was seeing the texture in a way that I had never looked at it before. And then I, walked through the house and saw my family members there, and for some reason it felt different. It was odd. And anyway, from that day forward, it seems like I've been more aware to this very day, and that was, my gosh, what, 40 something years ago. And the well, the paranormal or strange, weird, phenomenal experiences that I've had in my life really started that I can be really point to, or I guess accelerated from that day forward too. I mean, I had moments that I can go back earlier and say, well, that was, I knew something weird was going on, but to answer your question, it was then. And I was a teenager. I had just turned 16 a couple of months before.
Damn. So, was that your first out of body experience?
Well,
What was it?
yeah, I would say you could call it that, but traditionally, when people think of, an OBE, you're either meditating or you've been sleeping, and you
Hmm.
know, you leave the body, right? And you do astral travel. What I have come to suspect I did was, my consciousness uh, return to an earlier time in my life. In other words, I have developed this personal idea that we can time travel when we die, and specifically, we can go back and relive all or a portion of the life that just ended. Now, I personally think reincarnation's a real thing, so that's why I
Hmm.
say the life, that we just finished. I think that we're given the option, to go back. And I've also kind of developed this idea. This is all hypothesis, of course, that it has to do with your age, right? And transposition. In other words, what I think is that I died at 61 years old the first time. So I jumped back through my own timeline, and there I was in my 16-year-old self. See, 61 to 16. If I had been 72, I would have jumped back to my 27-year-old self, 81, 18, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but so I would say technically that would be an out of body experience if the consciousness, what we really are at our deepest, most important level, is out of a body, out of the body that just died, and then goes back to repossess, so to speak,
Hmm.
the body that I had been possessing, and that could explain what I like about this idea that I've come to is that could explain when I lift my hands up to my face and I think these are not my hands. To put a finer point on it, it's, well, these are not my older hands. These are my younger, wait, these aren't my 61-year-old hands. What? Wow, this is my younger self again. And that's what was happening that day as I was realizing, oh, I'm back. you know.
Hmm.
And there's, several reasons for me to point out that this time jump thing, time jumping, time traveling OBE, um, is what fits my experience.
You said that you saw your family.
Well,
Any way you
well,
can
yeah,
kind of describe that
yeah.
or
To
describe
elaborate
them?
that, remember, I wake up. I'm going. Wow, these aren't my hands, and I recognize this place. Of course, it's home. And as I'm walking through the house, I see my sisters, and I acknowledge, oh, those are my sisters. But there was something weird about seeing them there in that context. And then I saw my mom in the kitchen. Then I saw my dad, and I knew these people, but there was something that, wow, I'm seeing them. And why should that be so special? Well, as the years passed and I learned more and experienced more and have come to this tentative conclusion that I time jump in my own life, I think what was happening was, wow, there's my sisters, and wait a minute, they're young again too. And wait, there's my mom, she's younger, and there's my dad, he's alive again. My dad died in 2008, but so I think that's what was weirding me out. They were
Yeah.
very much alive, and right now we're talking in that timeline, that lifeline that I'm discussing here. This is the one the redo, the relive that I jumped back into, within my hypothesis. So, what it was is seeing them younger. I think seeing them, of course, seeing my dad alive again, and so that was part of the experience of having done this. I think.
Hmm. So was your first OBE accidental, or was it a learned meditation or experience that you practiced in order to achieve that?
Well, this is what I would consider most accurately the first OBE I did, and possibly the only one. Now, I am a very vivid dreamer,
Mhm.
and I don't know if we've talked about that or not, but I'm one of those that there is a place I go to often, not every dream, but often, that I know has got to be real and exists somewhere, because it's just when I'm there, I know that I'm there in this other place. So I think that if you're talking about, you know, how I understand OBEs, I think this might be the only one that I've actually done. And as
Mhm.
I said, if I'm right, where I did it when I died, then it's something you do, you know, in that afterlife world. This ties in, I think, to the goddess Hecate. Now, Hecate is the goddess of the underworld. She's, stands at the triple crossroad. And for the longest time, oh, what's the triple crossroad of? And then, dummy me, um, she kind of led me to understand that the triple crossroad is the intersection of time, more specifically, the intersection of past, present, and future.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, duh.
Mhm.
That makes sense. And since, according to the lore and the tradition, when you die, I find this whole Saint Peter at the gates to be very quaint. But, in tradition, whether you look at Egyptian or one of the others, looking at the tradition involved with Hecate, you meet her first because she stands at the gates to that afterlife, that you're passing through when you die. And I think, again, this is my hypothesis, is that you get faced with Hecate, and she gives you the choice. You can go back into the life you just ended. You can stay. Present would be staying in the underworld for a time in that afterlife, or future would be going on to your next life. That, of course, implies reincarnation. So I think, even though it's a technical OBE, it's not a classical OBE as people understand it, where you meditate and can detach for a period of time. Now, I'm pretty sure I could do that if I put my mind to doing it in the classical sense, or I may have done it and not recognized it as
Mm.
such. That could be what the dreaming is. When I'm having vivid dreams, it could be more that, yeah, it could be more OBE than just, traditional dreaming. Um, I would love to talk with someone who's more of an expert on OBEs to kind of flesh that out a bit.
I remember from a previous conversation we had, you had an experience with Hecate through a remote viewing. Am I getting that right?
Um, yeah, I she introduced herself in a period where I was learning remote viewing and doing it a lot. I was doing multiple viewings, RV sessions a day back in 2007, when I learned. And there were there's this little series in the mix of RV sessions in which she really was introducing herself through symbols. And finally, I got what was a glyph, kind of like the am I getting this right? The monad or the monas glyph, or alchemical, an
Hmm.
alchemical symbol, but the classic type glyph. And what the glyph um, was constituted, it connected a butterfly, an axe head, and a spinning wheel. Okay, and when I just did a simple search on those those three elements, I got a phrase called breaking a butterfly on a wheel. Now, I'll be honest with you, my gosh, I was in my 40s and I'd never heard that phrase that I could recall. And I find out that it's a phrase. And when I looked deeper, I found that it came from um, uh, St. Catherine of Alexandria. Okay, this story about St. Catherine of Alexandria, who refused the advances of the governor, bishop, or whatever of Alexandria, the ancient city, and he tortured her. Okay, and he put her on the wheel, which was this not so wonderful torture device, and the wheel broke. So I think he had her beheaded. That's where the axe comes in. And so, she's this martyred saint. Well, the problem with that is she never existed. When you look at her symbol, the wheel, okay, it is identical to the symbol of Hecate, okay, the Hecate wheel. When you look at the other things linked to Saint Catherine of Alexandria, um, specifically, again, it's essentially she was Hecate, syncretized, as they say, into this fictional Catholic saint. And the Catholic Church would do this when they realized that they're never going to get these heathen pagans to stop worshiping certain entities, gods, or goddesses. So, what they would do is, if you can't beat them, join them. They would just incorporate that god or goddess as a saint and give it a fake bio and say, there you go, you can keep worshiping Hecate as long as you call her St. Catherine of Alexandria. And the church recognized this publicly. They acknowledged this sometime mid 20th century, like in the 60s or 70s, I think. It's in a couple of Catholic or Vatican resources that they admitted, oh, yeah, St. Catherine of Alexandria was just created to cover Hecate and Hecate worship. So, but she chose to introduce herself through this, as when these things happen, they never just give you the answer. They want you to do some of the work yourself, right? So I was introduced to her through that glyph with the butterfly, the axe head, and the wheel, and a very personal experience. I went to do some follow-up research on the telluric current stuff that I was doing at the time with Sesh Hari, a writer that's been a friend of mine and whom I published. And I was at this. It's kind of a park, a museum park for the citrus industry, because here in Southern California, citrus was our our main agricultural claim to fame. Oranges, lemons, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I was there, and I was in the rose garden there. Now, roses are affiliated with St. Catherine of Alexandria and Hecate. Now, at the time, I didn't know the Hecate connection, but there I am sitting in that rose garden. And, adventurous me, I go saying, "Hey, Catherine, show me something. Demonstrate something for me. Show me something." Nothing happens. I get up, I drive, head back home, and I take a little detour. I just up and decide I'm going to take a detour, and I find this old quarry that's no longer in use. I subsequently found out that it had first been dug into like in the 1880s, 1890s, and it was very Lovecraftian. Alex, if you were to stand there on the spot, it's this old, stone quarry, and there's still big blocks there, and in the bottom there's
Yeah.
this brackish, nasty, oily black water with this nasty foam, probably a contaminant or something. And it was an overcast day, kind of. So it was very much a Lovecraftian scene. And so I look at that and I go, okay, this is interesting. Maybe this is what Catherine was showing me. On the drive home, which is only about 15 minutes from my house, I start feeling my energy drain out. I feel like I'm getting a fever. By the time I get home, I do have a fever, and I'm feeling run down. Um, and by a couple hours later, I have this pain in one shoulder and in my neck. And I'm just feeling awful. Well, 3 days later, I'm doing research on St. Catherine of Alexandria, and I'm finding the Hecate connection. Okay.
Mm.
During this time, as I'm suffering this, all through the next day and the day after that. And I'm learning about, oh, Hecate. Okay, this is interesting. And the third day after this happens, I decide I've got to go up and look at something on Mount Rubidoux, which is just a few feet shy of being an actual mountain, but it's a big hill in downtown Riverside. And I saw an article about this tower, this stone tower that was built in the early 20th century. And it's full of, it's connected to the intrigues with the Mission Inn and all this stuff. And for some reason, I feel compelled to drive over to Riverside and go up, climb the trail, and go up to this tower, which is nearly at the top of Mount Rubidoux. And, I decide to do this when I have no range motion. I can't turn to my right at all. I have no business driving a car, really, in that condition because I'm in pain. It's 3 days of this. But off I go. And, I make it safely because I know how to use side mirrors and rear view. And I get over to Riverside. I do I think it's like a 2 mile kind of trail. And I get up to where the tower is, and I'm in pain. And again, no range motion. I cannot turn my head to the right at all. I get up there and I find the tower, and I'm looking at the tower, and I go up, and there's like this little narrow window opening, and I want to see what's inside. So I walk over to that side where the side of the hill kind of takes you up close to it, but it's still above my head. So I reach up with both hands, pull myself up. I'm looking around inside there. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Oh, there's a bell way up there. So then I drop back down to the ground, and I'm looking all around, the hill and the tower. And that's when it hits me. The pain is gone. I'm able to move my head around. I have full range motion. And that pain that I've been suffering for 3 days, gone, completely gone. So it was as if touching that tower was a healing.
Yeah.
Now, subsequently to that, as Seshari provided me with more ley line analysis, I noticed in one of the maps he had given me that one of the ley lines follows the ridge of Mount Rubidoux and swirls around right to that quarry where I was. So I've always, and after that, I really saw there was no more. I understood that St. Catherine was fake, and Hecate was who I was dealing with. And ever since then, it's been Hecate. Um, I look at that as when I asked Catherine to show me something. Um, that's exactly what she did, and of course, I was talking with Hecate, not not a Catholic saint. And I think what she did was she led me to that quarry and afflicted me, where I would be afflicted. And then she led me on a research thread, which then led me to the tower on Rubidoux, where then I experienced a healing. And that was kind of her hello, introducing herself. Um, you know, that was my first real intense experience with her.
What was the technique that you used remote viewing, and were there any other experiences with Hecate that really stood out like that?
Yeah. Well, when I began to understand her connection to time, um, yeah, there was another one that was pretty overt. Um, this was, gosh, 7 years later, in 2014. Seshari and I had really gotten into studying time phenomena because we had some ideas about, me thinking that I had jumped back in time in my own life, that kind of thing. Um, and he had written me a series of letters. I have these three letters because Sesh is kind of an old fashioned guy. He does not do email, he doesn't like doing stuff on the computer. So I have these extraordinary letters, this collection of letters from him that it's almost like going back to the old days when these guys would share arcane information and thoughts, and it
Yeah.
was only in that one printed thing which you guard carefully.
Hmm.
um, he had gone into a hypothesis about time and how time works, within the context of this time travel discussion. And in this, he used this idea of these of kind of like a clock device, and basically it was a triangle in a circle. Okay,
Hmm.
and on his letter he showed three positions to make his point. Okay, so it was three times he drew this symbol. Now I have this extraordinary experience where I have to go to the grocery store one evening. I get in the car. Now by this time, remember, I've been dealing for 7 years with the experience of intense revelation of synchronicity and through synchronicity. Okay.
Hmm.
Those 7 years between 2007 and 2014, when I was investigating my Empire of the Wheel stuff that I wrote about in those books, that was 7 of the most intense years of my life for phenomena and experiencing that kind of thing. So I was used to weird stuff emerging and showing itself and being visited by crows and ravens, having messages left for me by people who, I saw no sign of them, but clearly they left something on my lawn or they left something in my mailbox just moments before. Just we could do like a series of shows on this stuff. So 2014, there's this evening where I have to go grocery shopping, and on the way there, um, a song comes on the radio, an '80s song, which you know uh, I hadn't heard in a while, but there it was, and it was getting my attention. Okay, I sensed, at least I interpreted it this way, I sensed that it was getting my attention, and this is how these things work. A lot of times, they do something to command your attention, kind of like say, "Hey, pay attention." Getting
Hmm.
ready to communicate something. Okay. What it was Tears for Fears shout. And what keyed on what gave me goosebumps as I'm driving to the store was the chorus where it's shout, shout, let it all out. These are the things dream about. Come on, I'm talking to you. Come on. And that is what I keyed on. Come on, I'm talking to you. And I got this weird goosebumpy feeling. I'm like, okay, something's up. Something's up. So then I get to the grocery store, Trader Joe's in this particular case, and they play music right over their PA system. So I go in there, and the song that starts playing is Don't Get Me Wrong by the Pretenders, and it's kind of a nice energy, right? A hoppy little song. And my reaction to it was, my first thought was, I'm right. I'm right. Hecate has to do with time, past, present, future. I was coming to this, and as this song is playing, it hits me that I'm right about that. And then I'm like in this giddy state. I'm I'm going through there, picking up my stuff, doing my shopping, but inside I'm elated. Okay, and I'm getting goosebumps, and I'm like, just wow, wow, I'm right as I listen to this song. And by this time, I've also thought, okay, I have had experiences where certain songs come on at certain times, and I know that it means something. So what I did when I got back home was I said, I need to look deeper at this song. First, I'll take a look at the lyrics. And so I looked at the lyrics, and I found one particular, there's a part that leading up to why I thought Hecate had to do with time was connected to one of those vivid dreams. Okay.
Hmm.
And so this is the point I need to tell you about the dream. I had this dream the night before going to the grocery store. Okay. The night before. And in that dream, I'm standing in a library, which is an old historical library here in town, near where I live. And I see this line of people walking past me. And in that line of people are two, and they're dressed like it's 1910 or 1900, something like that. So it's the past. And these two very elegant older women who are taller than the other people, very elegant and, very stately and kind of gray hair. None of the other people in the line notice me in this dream as I'm standing there watching them. But these two ladies who are identical, they are twins, they both look at me and nod and smile, and they're the only ones who acknowledge me. Like, yes, we see you and you see us. But they're twins, remember? Okay. So I'm looking at the lyrics. This is the next night. I'm looking at the lyrics of the song, the Pretender song. And one of them is, Don't get me wrong, if I split like light refracted. And that's when it hit me. I'm getting goosebumps telling you about it now.
Yeah.
That's when it
Yeah.
hit me. I realized those weren't twins. That was just Hecate. And the line in the song was clarifying for me. She was split like light refracted, okay, into the two beams. And what that said to me further was um, that this is a comment on the phenomenon that through her I had done and traveling back in my own life. And I'm still exploring the splitting of the consciousness or the splitting of the time. I'm still trying to pinpoint exactly what it means. But there it was embedded in that song. Then I took it further. I looked at the video. Now I'd been seeing that video since the 80s, but
Hmm.
I hadn't seen it in a while. And I'll be darned, I'm watching the video, and what is the video about? She's a spy. What did I do in my career? I was an espionage agent. Okay.
Dang.
And so she pulls up in this car to this club. Now, in three quick shots, okay, she pulls up to this club, and the first shot as she pulls up is kind of across the car. Um, she's perpendicular to the camera, and you see the entrance to this nightclub she's going to. Okay.
Hmm.
And there's a neon sign with the logo of the nightclub. Okay. And the logo was a triangle in a circle, just like Sechery had used in his letter. Okay. So that's one. It cuts to the next shot immediately, and it's her looking at a note that she had for, she's got to meet this guy at this place, and there drawn on the note is the triangle in the circle. So that's two. Okay. And then the next shot they cut, it's from the front end of the car, and it's the valet putting the parking card under her windshield wiper, and all that's on the card is a triangle and a circle. Boom, 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 1, 2, 3. Just like in the letter, the triangle and the circle was three times. Okay.
Mhm.
There it is in the video, three times, boom, 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 this exact symbol and shape. So I had had the dream that consciously made me connect Hecate to time. And then, I go in, I hear this song, and it has the lyric, you know, explaining the twin Hecate in the dream, and then there in the video again is are these symbols and the same number of them that's in the time travel letters. So this is an example of the experience I've had with these these I don't know what you call them, these encounters with Hecate where she shows me something, where she reveals something,
Mhm.
so that I understand it more clearly.
Yeah, do you feel like you're being used to relay some sort of message or information?
Do I feel like I am?
Hmm.
No, I am not. I tend to shy away from, you mean as far as for other people? Um, I tend to shy away from that. I think that I was on a personal journey, like we all are, and I had hit the right spots and the right marks, and it was a result of the path I was on, and I think anybody can go on the same path and experience the same things. I'm not selfish about it. I don't
Hmm.
hold it all back, and clearly I'm talking about it now, and I've talked about it more over time, but I don't know. I mean, maybe someone else would interpret it a different way and tell me, well, of course, dummy, you've look at your books and you're talking about it now. I'm like, oh, okay. But i tend to I tend to shy away of the anything that to me feels like I'm being self-important.
How did your perception of life change after
Oh,
these occurrences?
well, for one thing, I no longer buy the traditional explanations, the traditions that we're told to. Now, I quit. I chose to quit going to church, for example, not to beat up on religion, but I chose to quit going to church at 12 years old, because even though I believe God and the gods and the goddesses, and all this stuff, I believe in the spiritual world and stuff. I have no faith whatsoever that church for me, churchianity was a waste of time. It's a dead end. I don't find um, the connection through that at all.
Mhm.
And so I had disconnected from that communal level of that. And then over the years, as I got older and I read more and studied more and had more experiences, I kind of was, yeah, I'm not so sure about, the things I was taught and stuff. Of course, I'm an American. I'm talking about in the West, it's mostly Judeo Christianity.
Mhm.
But after these experiences, I felt more confident that, oh, okay, yeah, there's a lot more to reality than we can see, and I just don't. I buy even less. In fact, I reject the tradition and stuff that I was taught on that level. That's how it's affected me on that level. On another level is um, I there's things around us we don't see, that definitely influence us, and they're there. Not all good. I acknowledge that. I have never been, and I am still not one of those that, there's only angels. There's no such things as demons, or all ETs are good. I laugh at that. That's a very childish way, an ignorant way of looking at things.
Mhm.
But I became I'm just more accepting of, you know, things are not how, a lot of people think they are. Um, I I feel like I'm able to recognize signs in things. It's no accident when I'm visited by a raven or a crow, and not just me, but anybody. If you're getting visitations, that's no accident.
Hmm.
Pay attention to that. When I'm often visited by them, and interestingly enough, Hecate's number, she's the triple goddess, so her number is three, as well as the number 100 she's associated with, but she's the triple goddess, so three is a primary number with her. And when I get visited by crows and ravens, it's in threes. And when I'm out and they land somewhere near me and start yapping, I pause and I acknowledge them. I don't understand. I do not
Hmm.
pretend to be Dr. Doolittle and have conversations with them, but I acknowledge they're there because they're telling me something. And that
Yeah.
something will emerge from the subconscious either at that moment or within moments, or they come before, you
Yeah.
know, something. But what's interesting is the year that I had that experience that I just talked about with the time travel letters and the symbol and the grocery store experience, as I call it. The December of that year, on the evening of a day where that afternoon I had gone out to this site that I had discovered years before that was real weird and interesting, and that I had some weird experiences there. I went out to that site in December of 2014, and with an associate who was aware of the research I've been doing. He was a research associate,
Mhm.
and we went out there, and there's this thing painted on the ground, and what we were doing was measuring all the dimensions of it. Okay, and that night I had my one and only bona fide UFO experience. This thing hovering above my house, and after that experience, at no time did I think that it had anything to do with extraterrestrials. But at that time and subsequent to that, in further research and study and thought on this, it had everything to do with what I was doing that afternoon at this site that I told you I found with I call it the mandala painted on the ground.
Mhm.
Um, and so for me, um, that was, I don't know if you'd call it a reward, but it was an acknowledgement that what what my perception of Hecate was, and what my interpretation of mine and Sesheri's dabblings in the ideas of time travel, and my conclusion that Hecate is indeed standing at the crossroad of past, present, and future. I looked at that UFO as kind of a confirmation that I was on the right track. I was on the right path, because my UFO, and again, once again, another Walter Bosley. This is, well, we'd have to do a whole show on this, but I'm going to throw it out there. My UFO experience was much more in line with the cauldron of Dagda of the Tuatha Dé Danann. In fact, I think that Hecate is one of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the original ones that came here from the other world. And I think that's who I've been interacting with all this time, are the Tuatha. If you're familiar with Josh Cutchin and his work on the fairy lore, and even Jacques Vallée before he kind of bent the knee to the UFO people, as he has in recent, the ET people. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Early on in his work, he suspected something not ET, and he talked
Mhm.
specifically about the Tuatha Dé Danann and the fairy lore and stuff. He thought it was more that.
So,
Um,
so what is that for anybody that doesn't know or understand?
it depends on who you ask. I like to I like to have fun scoffing at the anthropological answer to that question. The anthropologists, they like to reduce everything to, it's if we don't understand it, it's religion. If we can't
Mhm.
explain where they come from, it's
Yeah.
it's just a tribe somewhere. But the Tuatha Dé Danann, when you look at the Celtic lore,
Hmm.
and this is the Celtic name for them, we don't know. Well, there's suspicions on what other parts of the world where they emerged call them. But the Tuatha De Danann are these beings, humanoid beings, who, according to the lore, appeared out of the sky. They indeed appeared with, actually, it's more, they appeared with a rumbling and a fire in the sky, in the cloudy sky, and they emerge from the clouds and land on the top of a mountain. Where have we heard this kind of thing before in different traditions, you know?
Yeah.
And I have no problem with the beings, you know, coming out of the sky, but that doesn't mean they're traditional extraterrestrials, as the Tuatha, you know, proved that they were able to manipulate their appearance. If you've ever heard of the term glamoury, which is connected with the fairy folk, glamoury is the ability to make you think you're like, if you see them and they don't want to be seen, and they usually don't, but you happen to see one of them, they can mess with your mind and your perception to where they look like something different. This is called glamoury.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And very often they can make themselves look so stunningly beautiful in that classic sense of beautiful, not just asexually induced beauty. You're stunned by just the visual beauty of them, so that then they've stunned you and they can get away quickly and more easily, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. That's just one example. But who they are, I've come to understand, and from the lore, is they're interdimensional. Okay, interdimensional in space and time. Okay, and they brought with them, all we know is it's referred to as the four treasures of the Tuatha De Danann, and allegedly it's a treasure from each one of their major cities in their world. And from these treasures, we get, for instance, the symbols of a deck of cards, the four suits of a deck of cards, right? This all comes from the traditional lore of the Tuatha De Danann. And they are the classic fairy folk who then went underground. Okay, eventually they were ran out of Ireland, and the story is that they retreated underground and they live in this subterranean world with us on this planet. Now I'm giving a very thumbnail
Yeah.
description here. There's a lot more to it, but like I said, the anthropologists among us will just reduce it and say, "Oh, there's nothing to the fairy lore stuff." But I would disagree, because my personal experiences, um, say otherwise. And a lot of that, again, not to beat up on religion, but let's face it, a major authority over culture and society for centuries
Yeah.
has been the church. And, to put a finer point on it, in the Western European tradition, the Catholic Church.
Hmm.
And basically, take any religion, organized religion, okay? The priesthood, essentially, they're car salesmen, okay? Don't buy that guy's cars that'll break down. They'll break down their garbage. You buy our cars here because ours are the best ones. That's essentially they're doing the same thing with spirituality and stuff. So they don't want competition. So anything that takes your attention away from their uh, their dogma, their propaganda, their lore, their thing that they're selling, of course they want to control that. Of course they want to reduce that. Of course they want to demonize that. And I mean, it still goes on today with these people. This is what was done with the Tuatha De Danann. But what's interesting is they are a different kind of beings. They come from a different part of reality, and they know when to come and go. They don't need us. If anything, we needed them, because when you look at stories about, like, strangers who come and help a primitive society become an advanced civilization, right? Like Quetzalcoatl or Viracocha in Latin America, for example. Well, these are, I think, and I'm not the only one, there's other scholars that think that these were members of the Tuatha De Danann when they fled Ireland. Um, this is these kinds of yeah, I think the two have emerged all over the world. They're just called
Mhm.
different things in different traditions.
Yeah.
And again, we needed them to advance. They didn't need us.
Did that visit lead you to any further understanding of, I guess, anything that you were kind of searching?
Yeah. I took it as a confirmation that I was, when Dagda, Dagda, when he appears, his cauldron, okay, in the sky, um, what was falling out of this UFO, okay, was this white hot molten, like just this molten substance that was just falling out of this UFO, and how that how I interpret that through my understanding of the Cauldron of Dagda is that was him sharing the blessings, his blessings, giving his blessings to me, uh, because I was simply on the right track, on the right path. So there he is, appearing and saying, "Hey, there you go," but also revealing that I think what I found, this thing called the mandala, um, is possibly a doorway to their dimension. Okay, the weird experience I had on this mandala before this was in the summer of 2010, and it was in the afternoon one day. I think it was on a Wednesday, and between like 2 and 3, and I'm standing in the middle of it, and I'm looking at these low hills out, in the distance on the horizon, and I see the image of Athena, the goddess Athena, with the owl on her shoulder. Okay, and and now it's not like a woman is standing there like in an Athena costume with a real owl on her shoulder. What it is, it's like burned across the hillside. When you see like these images where schools or small towns will like do kind of a burnish kind of thing on the hillside with the name of their town or some symbol or something, it was like that. It was like it was a part of the terrain, but there it was that image, like this head and shoulders image of the goddess Athena with the owl on the shoulder. Now I have a video of this at the Walter Bosley channel, in one of the playlists of a presentation that I did on this experience for Contact in the Desert in 2021, the online event that they had. And so you can see my drawing of this. You can see I even show, I found on the I used Google Earth to find what I was looking at on the hillside, and everything. So it's in that video. I try to bring the receipts. I
Yeah.
try to show these things, and in that is also the photos that I was able to take of the UFO, and such. But it also has a connection to the Integratron out in Landers, which I have kind of a personal experience history with, dating back to 1987, my first time I went out there. And so I'm still unwrapping this and digging into this and following its lead. Okay, pulling the thread that night, because I was there that afternoon investigating the mandala again, and then that night, this thing appears, and it had come from the direction of where the mandala is from my house. Okay. And when it left, it moved on in the direction towards the Integratron. As goofy as that sounds, that's what happened. Those are the
Yeah.
facts. And, there's now in my research, I'm not prepared to go too deeply into it, but there's details I'm leaving out that make all of this make sense. And eventually I will get around to presenting that. But to go back to your one question, I just look at life differently, and I look at spirituality differently and reality, differently. And I'm very comfortable with it.
Mhm.
I'm totally comfortable not thinking like the crowd. And it's just where I'm at because of my personal experiences. And I don't mean to invalidate other people's conclusions and where they're at based on their experiences. That's because we each have our own individual path, right?
Mhm.
Mine has led me to my conclusions and where I'm at with all this.
I mean, what changed my entire perception was this thing happened in life that you can't explain. It just led to ultimately starting to do what I love for a living and like living life in a completely different way. Do you
And
see
that was
that?
probably the reason for your experiences. A big part of it was to get you to live your life your way.
Do you have a similar experience to where your day-to-day life changed throughout all of this?
Oh, yeah. Uh, well, a lot of it was just being aware that there were people out there watching me. Now, remember, I come from a profession where I was used to that, so it didn't make me
Yeah.
nervous to
Mhm.
have people follow me. But one day I was followed from my home. The guy actually parked in front of my house and followed me when I pulled out around, my neighborhood and back to my house. I confronted him. But I was getting weird reactions from people. And what it was is I realized, oh, this is just as real as anything I did in my career as a federal agent. There's people that don't want this known clearly, what I'm digging into. And the wild thing was, what I was digging into was, 100 years ago. Why would anybody have a stake today in a forgotten, story from 100 years ago? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Which, and it meant that there's still, some type of implications going on. And I just became used to, I just accepted, like I said, the visitations, the crows and ravens, um, owls. I've had, you know, weird visitations and experiences directly connected to owls. Um, uh, yeah, I guess it, I can't say that it was such a a stark, shocking change for me because, to be quite honest, ever since that awakening experience I'd had as a teenager in '79, my strange experiences,
Mhm.
started happening and were pretty regular. And then I had a mentor who, wanted me to develop certain things in that realm. So while it was intense, and 7 of the most intense years of my life were the synchronicities and the weird visitations and the Hecate revelation and all the stuff I'm telling you about, it wasn't that my life before then was devoid of the weird. It just was turned up to 11.
Yeah.
you
Became
know
like a little bit
and
more profound and real.
yeah, and it was more confirming, right?
Hmm.
Whereas before I could always ask, well, maybe, am I a little crazy or whatever. What this was instead was, oh, no, 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 you're not crazy, we are very real. And you know so it was a big confirmation. So, much more, even more confident with the weird.
Oh, you mentioned your mentor. You've brought him up in a few previous conversations. What were some of the biggest lessons learned from him throughout your life?
Oh boy. Gosh, what can I say? Wow, that's funny. I've had that. You're the first person that's asked me that, and there's so much there to answer. But I don't want to sound, cheesy. But
Yeah.
I learned the importance of well, okay. Here's what he taught me about myself by getting me into what he got me into. Maybe that's a better way to answer it, because he knew me, better than I knew myself. But he put me in situations, or he got my career started for me, opening doors, and that path he put me on put me in situations, dangerous situations, where what I learned about myself is that I had the guts to stand there and deal with it. In other words, that all the times I've had guns in my face, I I
Yeah.
remained calm. I
Yeah.
didn't wet myself. It's like, oh, and I was able to think clearly. And that in itself, one time in particular in Iraq, I think I've told you about, one night after midnight, surrounded by, me and the guys I'm working with were surrounded by 9 guys with AKs pointed right at us, and we were doing spooky work. And it was like time slowed down, and I was not nervous. I'm looking around at these guys and able to think clearly. And even more so, actually, was the time that the guy in Afghanistan came at me with a sword, trying to chop off my head. And with this sword hacking at me, I'm kind of keeping him just inches away from me. I'm able to sit there and think clearly. Okay, I'm gonna pull out my weapon, and after I shoot him, I'm okay. I'm gonna run up that street to that. I'm just,
Damn,
and
yeah.
this is all happening in seconds, but it felt really slow, like I had time to think. So there's something that I learned about myself and about reality, because I'm not the only person on earth who's experienced that. You talk to special forces and SEALs and special operators guys, and I'm sure they got that, though they will have stories of experiencing that phenomenon. So what it was is he put me in situations where I learned the things he knew about me and the things that I needed to know to face the scary and the dangerous. He taught me, you know, interesting psychic tools and things that I subsequently learned are very real and work, which includes necromancy.
Mhm.
He taught me, you know, he's from the South, and the family was traditionally, I think, Southern Baptist or whatever. But so imagine my surprise when he tells me early on in his mentorship, because you got to understand, many gods, one Almighty. That was very pantheistic. That's very Greek. That's very Hindu, for a Southern boy,
Mhm.
to be saying. But that was, and so I started looking at that kind of stuff with more confidence, because remember, I suspected that. I kind of walked away from the formality, the club aspect of it, and it gave me, um, what he got me into gave me more confidence with myself, and with finding myself in situations that I could handle it, while at the same time, opening my eyes to the possibilities of all the weird stuff out there that I would face and had been a part of my life. But I don't
Yeah.
know if that answers the question
Oh yeah,
clearly.
absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like he had like a deep sense and understanding for some of this occult knowledge. Did he ever express where he learned any of that from or where he got
No,
some of this information?
no, he never told me. All I
Damn.
knew, and he passed away about like 9 years ago now, so I can tell
Hmm.
a little bit more. He'd been drafted in the army like in 1950, you know,
Hmm.
50, 51, something like that. He went into special forces. He went on this one mission, and he successfully completed it, and he was brought to the personal office of James Jesus Angleton, the infamous counterintelligence head of the CIA. And from there forward, his own career in the intelligence world began. And Angleton was my mentor's mentor for
Damn.
decades. And uh, so I know about his professional, career path: Army, Special Forces, connection with the CIA, and then he was involved with a group that he never did identify to me after that, and that's what he was bringing me into. And he had a debilitating stroke around 2000, was kind of forced to retire, and so that kind of shook things up a little bit as far as where my path went.
Hmm.
But no, he never did tell me where he learned that stuff.
Damn.
But I will tell you this: if you're familiar with, you got any kinfolk down in the South, they know a lot of spooky things. That's a spooky place down there. So I mean, magic is much more accessible
Mhm.
down there than in some other parts of the country. So I wouldn't be surprised if he started learning it when he was a kid. But I will tell you, Uncle Sam encouraged the further development of it.
I remember one time you brought up the necromancy stuff. You kind of wore like a lanyard,
Yeah, I
like a
still do.
leather. Yeah. Are you able to share what that is and what that's made out of?
Well, it's just a leather boot lace, and but here's the thing: the only reason I'm ever reticent to talk about it is he never explained to me the tradition from which it comes.
Hmm.
He just told me to make it and wear it and how to use it. So, not being aware of the tradition it comes from, unfortunately, in our community, we have people that are willy nilly about things, and they'll go off and try something without the proper guidance, if you will.
Yeah.
And I would hate for to put somebody out there, you know, and they don't have a. I had a proper mentor, you
Yeah.
know,
Hmm.
so I wouldn't want to get someone in trouble on the spiritual plane, as it were. That's why I'm reticent to say too much about, even though I talk about that I have it, and
I'm very
you know,
interested in, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
not that I was gonna try it.
oh, somebody out there would.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah. Very true.
Yeah.
Do you feel like he's ever tried to come in contact with you since he's passed away?
Sure, yeah. I just expect that he is around, because I think that people in our lives who have passed on can come around. I know my dad has come around. You know, um, and yeah, absolutely. I think he's watching out for me. But I think it's kind of like the Star Trek Prime Directive. Don't interfere. I think that's more limited than a lot of people like to think, because we're here on the ground, and we've got to live our lives and follow our paths, and ultimately there's something about doing that is vital to what this whole experience is about. So that's why the spirits, I don't think, are allowed really to interfere too much with our actions, and I think the most they are allowed to do is to, in certain times where we need it, know that they're there.
Yeah.
But beyond that, um, at least that's what I think I've experienced with him and others.
From your understanding, do you think that we come into this life with a purpose and a layout of what we want to accomplish?
Yeah, we can. We do. I think each individual, to an extent, yeah, comes into the life with each life with a purpose, and a kind of people say, how can how can fate and free will, coexist? If you got one, you can't have the other, and I disagree with that.
Mhm.
I think that certain things, yes, are probably engineered to happen in your life, but how they happen and how exactly you get there is the product of the choices and decisions that you will make.
Gotcha.
So both can exist. Now, on the big level, like humanity in general, like big, what we would call historical events, I think there are certain things that it's decided that this is going to happen, but who carries it out is not decided. In other words, the gods or whoever, they say, this big event, we want this big event to happen. And then they sit back and they see who eventually carries it out, because there we are living free, freedom of will, right? And that freedom of will might lead you to be in the position of being the one instrumental in making that big thing happen. Or you could be following a path where you're on the path to be the one to make the big thing happen. And some choice you make kind of diverts you, and somebody else makes the right choice and it puts them in the position. So, if that makes any sense,
Yeah.
and that kind of speaks to the idea of what's planned and how free will comes in. Now, Sesha reintroduced me to this concept of let me see if I can got this right. It's the axis of circumstance and the vector of desire. Okay, the axis of circumstance are the things you can't control. Like, now, again, if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, you can control this, but set that aside. You may or may not be able to control who your parents are, right?
Mhm.
You're not the one controlling where they decide to live and raise you, right? Those are the circumstances, and that has to do with the axis of circumstance, okay?
Mhm.
The vector of desire is your will, or the things you choose and want to do. And your reality is going to be uh, shaped and formed by where your vector of desire meets the axis of circumstance. You follow me? Like,
Mhm.
you know, you may not have a say on where you grow up, but you have a say on what you do while you're there. And I think that speaks to the idea of, the idea if there's any kind of plan or design on why you're here. Now, I also think that, yeah, people can. I think after you die, there's so much we don't know while we're alive because we're not supposed to, I think, because we're supposed to focus on, being here.
Mhm.
But I think after you die, yeah, we get this idea of, oh, you're shown your life. And I think what really happens is you're in that place where, oh, you can see more clearly what it's all about. Okay. And if there's something you feel strongly about, or something you feel like you got to do, I think then, and this ties in perhaps to why we're allowed to travel back in time in our own lifetimes. um, when you're in that afterlife, that point, then you can decide, okay, I need to go back because I got to do this, and you'll be allowed to.
Mhm.
And of course, you know you'll have to suffer the slings and arrows and consequences of that choice. you know Maybe things you've already lived through and survived, or new things that didn't come up. So, um yeah, I think that to an extent, things, you can be a part of that design and the plan of what your life's about and why you're here, but not 100%. I there This whole thing, I think, is yeah, to prepare us for something that's down the road, but also it is a test of character. um I do subscribe to the idea that, a degree of our suffering is why we're here, and that sucks.
Mhm.
But when you get through a phase of your life that's tough or painful, or you suffered, you come away with something very valuable. And that's, what's the word for it? Not illumination, as Indiana Jones's father says. When he asks him, "Dad, what did you get out of all this?" And he thinks and he goes, "Illumination." And that is something. In fact, that may be the most valuable reward of all this, because illumination means knowledge and understanding. And with knowledge and understanding, you can make even better choices in your actual physical reality.
Mhm.
So I think we're here to experience it all because it lends to that illumination, because there's something down the road that either we become or a place we go to, that it makes all the difference that we have had this experience. Some people say we become like gods of our own worlds. um, Maybe, or I don't know, and I think
Mhm.
that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
Is you don't know.
Yeah, do you think that we're led by some kind of spirit guide throughout our lives, or do you think there's a higher self
Yeah,
guiding us through everything?
yeah. I think there's a higher self. I think that there is what we would call a god. I think, many gods and goddesses. One almighty, one who is kind of the leader of them all.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all those things. And the reason we have to watch out, with organized religion, is you get these narcissistic egomaniacs called the priesthood, that it serves their egos to control your perception. And we got to be careful with that, because they twist things.
Hmm.
And you know the twisting of these essential things can really lead you astray and can get you off your actual path. And shame on them for doing it just to serve their egos and their designs for what they think civilization or society should be. Um, you know,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's not easy, and you're expected. I think the beings out there, the things that are out there that are on your side as a person, they expect you to do your part. They expect you to go down that path, and they're not going to make it easy for you, because that's not good for you, you know,
Mhm.
to just have it made easy for you. Um, so it's meant to be um, an endeavor. I look at it as an adventure.
Mhm. Kind of like a
So
soul evolution while we're here, in a way.
yeah, and I know that sounds like the typical, thing we've heard before, but maybe we keep hearing it because it's true.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it's about. One thing that just came to mind that you had asked the question about, what has changed for me and stuff with all this. I have actually, the more I've gone on this individual spiritual path, the more of a compassionate human being I have. Not that I was a monstrous a-hole before, not by any means,
Hmm.
but I understand compassion for other human beings a lot more and a lot better than anything I learned or could have learned. I know this is going to step on some people's toes, in a church,
Hmm.
um, or through organized religion. On my own path, I have come to this, and my understanding is that's what we're supposed to do, is become more, you know, compassionate, and I don't know. That's probably the best word
Yeah.
for it. So,
Do you have any advice for any inspiring authors? And how did you
ooh.
decide to get into writing?
Oh, well, I started writing in junior high, and it was because I love film and cinema, and being a lifelong love of, from childhood. I was an early reader. I think at 2 or 3 years old, I could read, and my sisters also. So, having been a voracious reader as a child and a lover of cinema, my dad was always taking us to movies and stuff. That led to me, oh, well, I can create my own things through writing. And so I started writing at, that young age. As far as a particular writer or books, wow. Gosh, that's one of those questions that always puts you on the spot, because I'm somebody with thousands of books, a whole home library, and you ask me, and I'm like, because there's just so many.
Yeah.
But uh, it's funny, as a fiction writer, I can tell you, who inspired me and motivated. But with the nonfiction, there's just, in the research and things, I don't know. That's weird. That I can't answer that question. Wow. And I know as soon as I hang up here, um, something will come to mind. But right now, I'm just doing a blank on that.
Do you have any advice for any upcoming authors that are, potentially thinking about writing?
Oh yeah, just do it. Do
Yeah.
it. Don't get wrapped up. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. When if you're gonna write a book, you can do it. If you can read, you can write a book. There's nothing magical or mystical about writing books. Um, but here's the thing: what people get caught up in, the perfectionism. No, get that crappy first draft done. Get it from beginning to end. Know what your ending is. Not this. This is of course obvious in fiction, but even in nonfiction, no, pick three major points that your nonfiction is going to argue. Okay, and remind yourself that it's those three major points that your sub points and your arguments need to support. And, know that in the end, you need to reiterate all that and say, well, now you've read my book, and I'll say again, blah, blah, blah. Just know where you're going and get through that first draft. It doesn't have to be perfectly written, because writing is rewriting. Okay. And have confidence. Don't let somebody else who tells the whole world that they know what's going on um, discourage you from maybe you putting your idea out there that conflicts with that or contradicts that. Have the courage of your convictions, have confidence, go at it with confidence, and again, don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. And when you get one done, do another one, and just keep doing them, and before you know it, the writing is better, more polished, you feel more confident with what you're doing, and you have a whole bunch of books written, and hopefully, enlightening more people to ideas and things you've discovered along the way.
My last question is, if you were able to send a message to everybody in the world at the exact same time, what would that message be?
Oh boy. The first thing that came to mind when you asked that was the word think. Don't don't rest on belief. Think. Don't just believe. Think. Thinking requires critical skills. Thinking requires investigation and research. Thinking requires looking at something and analyzing. Think, and think for yourself.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, um, have compassion for other people.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. Well, you have a sale going on your website, walterbosley.com, correct?
Oh, not anymore.
Not
And
anymore?
I got to tell you, there's been some changes with my company. WalterBosley.com is going to be coming down.
Okay.
And so there's to get my books, you have to go to right now, you have to go to lulu.com, lulu.com.
Okay.
That's where my books can be purchased. The sale is not going on anymore. And of course, I'm at the Walter Bosley channel on YouTube.
Cool. Any other thing you'd like to shout out?
No, that's it. I'm returning at the beginning of the year. I've been kind of taking a break from things and with the business, and returning to the channel. The first of the year with new episodes, and
Awesome.
just kind of looking forward to going into the new year.
I definitely have appreciated getting to know you throughout this year and just like sharing your insight towards anything crazy that I ask. It's really, really appreciated, man. And
Oh well, thank
I
you,
always
and
appreciate you coming on the show.